You're listening to the Values and Leadership Podcast, where business leaders share their stories of purposeful impact and success.
Hello, and welcome to the Values and Leadership Podcast, a podcast for innovative leaders who want to apply new ways of doing things in work and deploy their talents and time to earn their legacy every day. I am your host, Ahmed Arif. This episode is the production of CorpoCure, a values-based leadership development advisory firm that unleashes possibilities for leaders in elevating their business and its people to their next best stage and have a purposeful impact in business and in life. Today, we have a special guest. We have Anthony Placek. Anthony, he is a leadership consultant now, and he started his leadership journey maybe more than 20 years back. In 2012, he earned his executive certificate in leadership and management from Notre-Dame University. And in 2017, he complemented that study with an executive doctoral program with an emphasis in practice management. Currently, Anthony holds several leadership positions in healthcare and in leadership development. He is the VP with ATI Physical Therapy. He is the VP and Executive Operation Ambassador with Confluent Health. And last year, he started his leadership consulting under his name. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you. Honored to be here and glad to be a guest of yours.
Great. The pleasure is mine, Anthony. Let's start and so quick and go into our topic. First topic. Actually, you started as a physical therapist and quickly you took on increasingly complex and progressive roles in healthcare operation management. What made you make this choice?
Well, my roots began in the fact that I come from an entrepreneur household. My father had his own business, and for me, I always had an interest in finance or healthcare, and went to school and got a healthcare administration degree. And that really, was a great opportunity to get to know the industry a little bit deeper. I had some time with some insurance companies and ended up, though, experiencing the provider-based services firsthand, based off the fact that I needed to get a little bit of healthcare. I believed at one point in time that I was a high-level athlete and found myself in need of a surgery. And then from there, subsequent physical therapy, and working with the physical therapist that I did, it got me excited to come on board and help them grow their organization, and went back to school to get my license in order to take the business and underneath my leadership and move it to the next direction. But unfortunately, the timing wasn't right, and there were some inner workings that bled into the business professional side that I didn't want to partake in, and found myself aligning with another small group at the time, and jumped on board with them in order to open up some new clinics and be a part of their leadership team, and ended up finding a great home at ATI, and we experienced exponential growth. I, in fact, started in the 5th location, opened up the 13th location, and now the company sits at over 850.
850 employees, correct?
850 locations, over 8,000 employees.
Great. So in your interaction with healthcare management, do you find them mostly as doctors, or they are from business school graduates, or is there a mix between them? And did you find in the healthcare management, did you find there was a communication barrier between doctors or business school graduates, if they are there, or doctors? Do you find them that they are well equipped for management positions?
That's a great question. In fact, that's the nucleus of the problem that I aim to solve with my leadership development program. As I mentioned, my path may be a little bit different in that, I had an idea to be in business, entrepreneur mindset, and understand that side of it, but also have the cornerstone in the heart of a provider. And, the two sometimes do not go hand in hand. I can tell you that firsthand. In fact, my role within the organization, allowing us to grow and scale to the capacity that we did, was taking those that are providers and helping them understand what it's like to be a manager, but more importantly, what it's all about to be a leader. And so I would think that when you're looking at the question that you presented, there is, in a sense, commonly a dichotomy, and in particular, those that are providers that are aiming to get into the administration side of it. It's a very different world when you're getting to understand the business and getting to see the financials, and then you're responsible for not only taking care of patients through others, but taking care of a team and helping them develop and getting them to be the best versions of themselves while working in their current roles. And so it's there's a little bit of an art to it from a communication perspective, but there's definitely some challenges when it gets down to looking at it from both sides of the coin there.
Mhm. There was one interesting thing that I noticed lately, that in a lot of the private healthcare management positions, people gets promoted. I mean, doctors gets promoted first before they are exposed to leadership programs or leadership training. And I think this adds some challenge to the doctor because he's not yet that equipped while he's getting his leadership program later. So, can you describe a situation where you find that someone was really not comfortable in being in a role while he finds that the responsibilities is more than the role that he thinks initially?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people have the presumption that management and leadership is kind of an easy thing, or perhaps you were born with the ability to do it. And, I would have to say a firsthand example of that is myself. Although I aspired to, have the business side of it underneath my belt, when I first became a leader, there's some mistakes I made and some stumbles. And, again, being a provider, taking great care of the patients was my focus, and then shifting gears and having to work with others was 100% one of the largest challenges that I had. And really, again, the mistakes I made have allowed me to learn how to be a better leader. And what is fundamental to my leadership program, it's not only through the coursework that I've taken or the industry genre leadership research that I've done, but it's through personal experience and experience of developing and leading others. And that very conundrum, as a provider, to jump over into the leadership is not as easy as one thinks. And so that's definitely a challenge. And you could definitely make some mistakes and disenchant your team. And when that happens, it's really hard to get the results that you desire organizationally.
Yeah, I can hear you when you're saying that you have to learn personally from your personal experience because you didn't get this kind of learning in the beginning or this preparation to being a leader in the first place. So you have to manage your way yourself and learn from your personal experience. Can you share with us how did you manage to survive this period?
I would have to say, I think part of it is really, the nature of who I am, but who I am is also something that has progressed a long time as I've studied the art of leadership. That said, it requires a high level of attention and reflection to how you're interacting, and really the foundational block of it is coming to know thyself and really understand who you are and where you're at and how you're being perceived. And so, for example, in my leadership development program, I spent a lot of time going over that, in particular, aligning with your values. If you can align with your values and understand where you are at and work in congruence with them, you create your own style. And leadership, though, is interesting because it is situational and your style might have to modify a bit depending on what the circumstances are. But as long as you stay rooted and congruent with your values, it becomes one where you acquiesce well. And so you have to find a moment in time to be reflective and understand, your value set, as well as, does that marry the organization, and that helps you bridge into your opportunity to grow as a leader or perhaps your style.
Great. So you mentioned about you have to be attention about your situation and reflecting more and understand yourself and aligning with your values and have the values congruence. And then in the end, when you are sure about your value set and you start to think, is this fit with the organization or not? Correct?
Correct.
Did you find that easy or did you find challenges? And if you didn't find challenges, did you find other leaders who find it challenging for them?
you know Again, always a challenge in my book, because you're growing and you're learning. And I think, that perception though of challenge, I think, is important to peel back and unpack, because mindset's relevant in that. I think, people that have a growth mindset and an open mindset, one that, they want to take responsibility and ownership of their circumstances, they tend to flourish in what that challenge may be. And so I think, when you look at aligning the values and making decisions around, you have to understand that it's a growth opportunity. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is readying yourself for your personal change and you evolving into a new person and a new leader, in the manner that you so choose, in the path that you want to take that's congruent with those values. I think, that said is kind of the world of a coach as well. As you become more inclined and equipped to be a coach, you really start to see things from a different perspective. But again, you have to have that open and growth related mindset in order to make those changes on a personal level to acquiesce to the leader that you so choose to be.
Can I infer from what you said is that it is like a kind of self-leadership style?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what that requires is that awareness that we spoke about, being able to be, aware of how you're being perceived, how you are interacting in the moment, how you're showing up, so to say, are so critically important. And I think, communication is such an interesting mode of an important mode of how we really resonate with others. I think relationships are built one conversation at a time. And if you don't have that awareness to how you're being perceived, or perhaps the circumstances that the receiver of your information is under, you sometimes miss the mark. And when you miss the mark, you could stilt that relationship backwards. Or if you hit the mark, you can really build a trusted relationship. And I think it's so important in leadership to not only know thyself, but also to be able to be someone who's trustworthy and build trusted relationships.
So to build this kind of trustful relationship, do you find empathy has a role in that?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I think, going back to that awareness, social emotional intelligence is critical. And if you're unable as a leader to put yourself in someone else's shoes and gain insight to their perspective, you tend to miss the mark. And so I would think to be an empathetic person, is important, but also watch your balance on that as well. Again, there's a great art to leadership, and empathetic versus sympathetic are two different stories, and you need to be able to be mindful, so that you continue to help your team grow and flourish.
Great. And I can see from the progression of your career that you have a leadership journey where you become more strategic and critical leader, and you consistently drive growth and revenue increases and profitability. So did you find all of that in line with your values, or you find challenges in the beginning, or it was seamlessly for you?
Yeah, that's one of the big things about, being a challenge in mindset about being a provider, is I think that we all carry in our hearts the idea of taking care of patients, but sometimes feel a little bit bashful around running a profitable business to do so. And I think, again, the health of and the ability to deliver great healthcare, you have to have a healthy business and a platform and a vehicle to do so. If you have a great running business, you can, really focus on taking better care of the patients or creating access opportunities for the patients. And so, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. I think this is where, from a growth perspective and understanding the business side of it, when you know yourself as a leader, you have that opportunity to connect and build trusting relationships with your team. You have that opportunity to really foster a great culture, and a culture around taking care of people, but also a culture around getting results. And again, getting results is, there's a discipline to that. And the only way that you can perform out there is if your team is engaged. And what I'm, and ultimately what I'm aiming at is that you have to be aligned on purpose. Our purpose is to as a provider, take care of our patients, and everyone has that in our heart. But also we have a purpose and a duty to, be able to have a mechanism to do so. And that's where coming into it from a business perspective is so important. There's a great way to take care of patients. And if you have a culture that's built around customer service, you create that opportunity to bring your care to the next level, take great care of patients, and run a phenomenal business.
Great. What did you find a good way to achieve this? Is it through cultivating behaviors, certain behaviors, after you agree on the strategic objective and the caring for the patient? So, is it about creating certain behaviors or creating a mindset for the team? What did you find the best way?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think you have to be aligned in mindset, and I think that begins with culture. And as I mentioned, foundation is the foundation to that is communication. And I do a lot of focus, and I've done a lot of research on the thoughts of positive psychology and communicating. Dr. Martin Seligman brought up active constructive responding. And I think the way that we communicate with people creates a bit of opportunity to build a culture that is open and a culture where people feel they can be contributory and a part of something bigger. And when you have that, you create an opportunity for people to go into a zone of the above and beyond, and they're willing to contribute and they're willing to have open dialogue. And when you do that, you start to create, because the mindset is foundational and everyone has the mindset that, hey, we're in this together, we're going to work hard, I'm not being judged, it's an open environment where it's about learning and growing. My behaviors are going to follow suit to that, and I'm going to do everything I can because I know that I'm going to be taken care of, and I know that my leader has my back, I know that my team has my back, and we're setting out on our mission to do something meaningful for those we serve. And we're going to be able to have some open dialogue to do it in a way that consistently pushes us to be the best.
So I like when you mentioned that we need to have an open culture and people are contributing. So the team you mean by people. So is it like the team are participating in the decision making, or you mean something different, or just ideas, or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on the circumstances. There's an art to decision making within itself, and there's a lot of studies on it. Um, from my standpoint, a collaborative relationship with people is important. I think people want to be able to have their voice heard, and so from that standpoint, I think it's very critical to get input, but also don't get paralyzed by getting that input and putting it in a set of circumstances in which no decision is ultimately made. So there's a definitive art to that. So I think that it's important to have people have their voice heard, important for them to feel contributory. But at points in times, decisions need to be made, and so you need to be cognizant of that as well. The art is when decisions are being made, is really getting back to the buy-in and having the team follow through. And to me, again, if it's aligned in values and purpose, it allows people to understand that why. And so if a decision is made and yet it was maybe against the thought process in what some of the teammates have thought or said or contributed on, at least they know why. And I think they'll get buy-in and they'll still follow suit, and they won't have divergent behaviors. And I think that's very important. And that's where getting some of their input is so valuable, because then you understand where they're at, you understand their thoughts, and they've been considered, and that makes people feel a valuable part of the team, even if the decision isn't one that they wanted to see happen.
Great. I like when you mentioned that we need to have a collaborative style between us as leaders and the team, and to let the people voice is heard. So let's say someone who is a manager still has this manager mentality that he's the one who should give orders and people has to listen to him. So he's always using to silencing and sidelining. I mean his team. So in your practice, when you have a leader like that or a manager like that, how do you make him have the leap of faith to be a leader and really give opportunity for the voice to be heard?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that goes back to style, and there's some quite a bit of research out there, and that authoritative style is perhaps right in certain situations if it's a turnaround, venture type of story, but it tends to be short lived. And in my mind, in an ideal world, in order to be a leader, you need to have followers. And if you are just constantly telling people what to do and belittling them in the manner in which you do so, they aren't going to be true followers. They're going to be doing it because they need their job. And if they need their job, and they're not happy with their job, they're going to look for a job elsewhere ultimately. And so you're going to, long term see a little bit of a point of failure, in particular if you're building something for sustained success.
So I like when you mentioned, Anthony, that there is a manager should be focusing more on the long-term vision. But as you know, in the managers usually think in the short-term vision, and they have a checklist that they want to make sure that it is all of it is checked and nothing is pending. So how come they manage to balance between the long-term thinking and the short-term requirement and results?
It's a great question and such a challenge. And I think, it goes back to the purpose and the aim of the organization and keeping that front and center. Life now is a challenge in which, you have to, in particular, the financial world lives on quarters. And so things become all about, you're only as good as the quarter that you perform in. And that becomes hard because you start to make short-sighted decisions. But if you keep grounded in your purpose and your aim in what you're doing to serve your customer base, and that may pivot as the world and markets change around us, but if you keep true to that and keep true to your mission and the values in the vision statement, you're able to keep a line of sight on that long term. Now, of course, you're going to have to hit your short-term goals, but those short-term goals should always be built off a set in steps towards the long term, and always in context of what that vision and mission are. And Simon Sinek has a great book, The Infinite Game. And when you have your organization aligned around your long-term standpoint and how you achieve it, it's critically important to carry that type of mindset to have that long-term success. I think if you start to do the short term, you make decisions and you're going to lose the congruence with the values that you have if decisions are made that don't serve that longer term or purpose.
There is a challenges for the managers to make the balance between the long-term value, the long-term vision, and the short ones. And maybe there is an element of fear that goes to the leader's mind or goes to the manager's mind that they need to achieve something now, and they may miss the big picture. So how do you help them? How do you help the manager to bring back the values and the long-term vision? How you can help them in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is really circumstantial. But I think it also falls back onto the point earlier in our discussion about culture. And, I've seen cultures where if you don't get your results, you're worried about your job. And in a sense, that becomes fear driven. And that's just not a healthy culture. And so I think the best way to do it is really get culture right. If you have culture and it's one in which mistakes can be made, as long as they're owned and, again, not blamed or passed the buck on it. If you miss and you miss for a valid reason, you have an opportunity to, sit down with your teammate and find out why. Perhaps it's an obstacle that needs to be removed structurally from the organization. Is it something where they haven't had the right training where you can help them out? And it creates conversation when you have that open mind and the right culture in a growth related culture. And so I think, you have to start with the system first, so to say, and then kind of pierce down into the unique circumstances of the individual and jointly aim to solve them so that they can stay on track to hit those short-term goals. And in particular, if the mindset's built around what we're here to do from a purpose perspective, or the long-term perspective, then you're still making that forward progress. You maybe didn't hit your deadline, but again, look to solve that so that next time you do. And if everyone's learning from the issue at hand from not achieving, it only betters the entire group. In particular, if people are open about it and can share. And that's what makes a great organization or a great culture, is that forward progress and having that openness to learn from each other and perhaps own mistakes and grow from those mistakes. It's also, in a sense, a resilient culture.
Great. You mentioned a very good point that the leader is, he can be trying, but sometimes the environment, as you mentioned, the culture can be against him. So, and he may try to fix something structural, and he may, let's say, he may succeed, he may not succeed. So, what can be what can be done in this case if the manager is alone and the culture is against him? What can he do?
That's a hard road, and that's where you see companies that have some high attrition rates because people feel like they can't do anything, and it becomes quite a challenge. But I think this goes back to again values,
Hmm.
and where you're at in terms of your ambition. If the company has the right purpose, um, how do you lead up? How do you address those bigger situations with those that may have more cultural based influence? And I think that's one of the most challenging things to do, in particular, being in the mid-level type of range of management versus at the C level. I think from that side of it, you know, you as a leader have the opportunity with your team to build your own culture, a culture within the culture. And one of the best things you could do in leading up is with your culture that you create, get results because results speak. And if you're able to get results, people are going to notice and they're going to say, hey, what are they doing differently? And
Hmm.
that gives you that opportunity to create an open path in leading up and speaking to your manager about some of the best practices that you have. And I'm certain that if a manager is seeing disparity in performance, that they need to pull performance up because they're responsible for it. They're going to want to connect you back to the folks that are struggling. And you can kind of make your culture contagious when you go about it that way because you're getting results and you're building the team and the brand.
Mhm. Great, great. Sticking to your values, bring your team together, build a subculture within the bigger culture, and get results and lead by example. This can be the way forward for any manager or leader suffering being alone, suffering values incongruence, let's say.
Absolutely. It's a hard road though. So I mentioned, having a resilient culture as a leader, you need to have some grit and some resilience in order to go down that path because it's a formidable task, but it can be done. It can be done in particular if you have a supportive leader. And again, the best way to have a supportive leader is get results because you're making your leader look good.
In your leadership consulting, you started your leadership consulting last year. So for you, when you opened your consulting, leadership consulting, did it mean caring for the leader's mental health or a different thing or a different meaning for you?
That's a great question. I think the aim in what I like to bring to the table circulates around my passion and my personal mission statement, and that is to empower and inspire others to be the best version of themselves and see success as they define it. And so um, I think it covers the spectrum of your question. And for me, I love helping people, and this is the provider heart in me, see success. And whether it's a question about mental health or it's a question about organizational results, it's really truly what is the issue at hand and how can I help solve it. And from my lens, um, sometimes it does require getting into the mindset and frame of mind in order to clear some obstacles to move it forward so that perhaps if it is results that you desire that you can get them because you're going into it with the right context and how to lead by leading yourself better by perhaps um, empowering and adding some fuel to the engagement with your team, creating that right culture. And when you have that right culture, it's very easy to get people to get behind the why and get those results that you desire.
Mhm. I like it when you mentioned your passion is driving you. You want to inspire others and for others to see success as they defined it. This is really powerful. This is really powerful, Anthony. Thank you. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much.
Great. In the end of this meeting and interview, I really thank you very much, Anthony, for the insights that you give to me and give to the listeners today. And thank you for your time again.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate what you do and the questions that you asked today. I was honored to be able to share some thoughts You could reach me on LinkedIn if you wanted to connect and have a great discussion about leadership and leadership strategy in order to see success as you define it.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Anthony, for your time. Thank you. Really, really, really honored to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.